Okay, well, there is our cue to go ahead and get started. So welcome to the Disability Awareness and Intervention Echo. If you've not taken a minute, please put your name and contact information into the chat. Just helps us all build that professional networking as we're here on this virtual world. As you noticed, we are recording today's session. We use that for educational and quality improvement purposes. By being on the call, you are consenting to being recorded. So don't hit that leave button, but if you have big grief about it, go ahead and leave and watch the recording. We store our recordings and information on our Canvas pages. And we also love just active participation. So over this virtual world, it's using that chat feature or raising your hand, asking those questions, sharing information so we can all learn from each other on this call. There's so many amazing people that we're all doing work that we need to share and get information out there. So we love when it is shared in chat, in questions, comments, through case narratives. That's a great way to get information from everybody on this call. I know there's lots of times that I'm working with families that if I could just pick people's brains to learn more about, I think it helps the families and it helps me become a better provider. So if you're interested in presenting a case for us, reach out to us and we'll get you on that schedule. But when we're talking about things, remember just to protect individual privacy. So de-identify any information. If you have any questions about that, you can reach out to one of our great hub members. They all have an asterisk or will now be reminded to have an asterisk in front of their name. It just makes them easier to find in chat or if you have specific questions that you want to ask them. If you've never joined an Echo session, welcome. We're glad that you're here for this one. We all will have a subject matter expert. Today, we are really lucky to hear from Kelly Hess, who works here at the Institute for Disability Research Policy and Practice. Then we will have a case presentation where we all discuss the case. So sharing our ideas and recommendations that helps build that professional networking. I know that there are lots of times that as we're sharing things, we get to learn from each other and know each other and build our professional networking that way. If you need to know how to rename your profile, it is here as well as how to raise your hand and do your reaction feature. I don't know how many of you guys have all seen that reaction feature where the heart or a thumbs up or a clap comes on the screen and goes up. You have to have your camera on for that. I'm surprised that it took me that long to remember that that's the way it needed to happen. But so you can use that reaction feature as well. Again, we love having those active participation. But just to remember some session etiquette. So keep your questions brief and on topic. Always introduce yourself so we know where we're from. Like my name is Janelle Preston. I work here at the Institute. I am the project coordinator for Project Echo. And we encourage you to turn on your camera. Again, in this virtual world, looking at smiling faces versus black screens is always easier for a presenter. Throughout today's session, we will be dropping in a survey link. And I just want to thank everybody who takes those surveys. We really do utilize that information that is shared with us to find topics, find presenters, find things that everybody on the call is interested in. And so thank you for filling those out. That's where we send out our certificate of attendance that you can utilize for professional development credits. Like I mentioned, we store everything on our Canvas page. So whether it is the recordings, the PowerPoints, information that is shared the presenter shares with us, handouts, recordings, all of that is stored on our Canvas page. So if you would like access to that, please email disabilityecho@usu.edu. Just another plug for those case studies. They're a great way to learn from each other on this call, as well as to get information for families or clients that you're working with. So if you're interested in that, please reach out to us and we'll get you set up on that schedule. We do have social media that we share information about all the echoes that are happening here at the Institute, as well as resources, things that are shared with us from people on the call. And so if you want to take a minute and follow us on social media. I'm going to stop sharing and turn the time over to Kelly, who is going to be our subject matter expert today.
All right. Thank you, Janelle. Can you guys see my slides?
Yep, that's perfect.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you, Janelle. Thanks to the Echo Project for inviting me. I'm excited to share some ideas with all of you today. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about accessibility and inclusion. But before we get too far into that, I just want to tell you guys a little bit about myself. Like Janelle said, my name is Kelly Hess. I work at the Utah State University Institute for Disability Research Policy and Practice. I've been there for about 7 years, but all of my professional work since the time I graduated has been in the disability community in one way or another. I am a person with a disability, and I'll tell you a little bit about that just to give you some context. It's, if we were together in person, you guys would get a lot of visual information just if we were in the same room together. But I'll just kind of tell you a little bit about myself. So I was born with a very rare genetic disorder that it's called Escobar syndrome. It's not one of the more popular, trendy disabilities that you might have heard of before. And it's okay if you don't remember the name of it, because half of the time I forget the name of it because it is so rare. It's just not really, talked about a lot. But my disability just came with a couple different characteristics. Primarily, it causes my joints to contract. So my body is shaped a little bit differently. I'm a smaller person. I'm in my 40s, but I'm quite small for an adult woman. I also use a wheelchair for my daily mobility. I use a power wheelchair that gets me everywhere I need to go. I also, you might notice, I use a ventilator to support my respiratory system. So you can kind of hear a little of that in my speech, because I have to kind of sync my speech with the air that the ventilator provides for me. I wasn't always on a ventilator. As a teenager, when I started to develop respiratory difficulties. So by my late teens, that's when it really got to the point where a ventilator to help was going to be the best way to help exchange the air between what I would need to breathe in and the air I need to breathe out. So the ventilator goes everywhere with me. It's attached to my wheelchair. That being said, I don't always stay in my wheelchair. I'm not in my wheelchair right now. I'm sitting at a desk in a chair, but my wheelchair is very nearby, and I am obviously close because I'm attached to my ventilator. Um, a little bit more about me. I I live in Ogden. My, at the institute, I'm with the research and training team. A lot of my professional background is on employment for people with disabilities. That's something I'm very passionate about. And so I was excited when Janelle invited me to talk about accessibility and inclusion because it's a it's a topic that I care about a lot, both on a professional level, but also a personal level. I'll also share that accessibility and inclusion, it's a really big part of my life. I shared a little bit about my own um, disability situation, but I'm also married to a man who also has a physical disability and he uses a wheelchair as well. It's totally different kind of wheelchair than mine. His disability is very different from mine. His was an acquired disability. He was in a auto pedestrian accident when he was a young child. So he doesn't use a power wheelchair. He uses a manual wheelchair. But together we accessibility is a big part of our life and how we navigate the world. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to come and share some thoughts and ideas on this topic with all of you. So take a minute and imagine arriving at a building with a wheelchair ramp. You can enter, but once inside, no one speaks to you or includes you in the meeting. Were you truly included? So just imagining this scenario, this might be something new. Maybe none of you have been in a situation where you've had to think about needing a ramp to access a building. Um, and then further, even if you are able to access the building, if no one is speaking or interacting with you, how might that feel? I just want you to imagine that and think about it to yourself and in your mind for a moment. This kind of leads us to this idea of both accessibility and inclusion and how they intertwine. So, first, what is accessibility? Think to yourself, what are the first what's some of the first ideas or thoughts that come to mind when you hear the term accessibility? Is this something that you think about in your own life? Maybe you have a family member or someone you care about that needs to think about accessibility. Accessibility is designing environments, products, services, and information so people with disabilities can access and use them. This is a very short list of just a few of the very you know, prominent or easily thought of uh, accessibility. So a lot of times when we think of accessibility, we think of wheelchair use and wheelchair ramps. We think of elevators. Um, Maybe we think about closed captions, people that do better with that support. um, Screen readers, braille signage, accessible websites, an adjustable desk. Again, these are just a few things, but when we really get thinking about items that support accessibility, the list can be extensive and the options are really endless. So, what is inclusion? Inclusion means ensuring that people with disabilities or all people are welcomed, respected, valued, and able to participate fully. So some examples could be inviting everyone to be part of the decision-making process, providing equal employment opportunities, encouraging participation in school activities, using inclusive language, listening to disabled voices when designing policies. So these are just some of the differences between accessibility and inclusion, but both are needed in order for people to exist in a place and be part of their communities. So accessibility focuses on removing barriers. It really looks at access. It's physical and digital accommodations and answering the questions, can they get in, or can they get to this space? Can they access the information? Where inclusion is a little bit different because it's more about thinking beyond just getting people into a space or letting them access content. It's really thinking about creating a sense of belonging. It focuses on participation, not just inviting someone and making sure that they can get to the event, but making sure that they can participate in the event. It's looking at social and organizational culture and asking, do they feel like they belong? So not just can they get in, but do they feel like they belong? I'm going to share a quick little clip. I feel like this kind of explains accessibility and inclusion in a good way. Chanel, will you just give me a thumbs up? It should still be sharing sound, but if not, just give me a signal.
Going out to eat should be a special occasion. Part of the experience is being welcomed to the restaurant and enjoying the atmosphere as you start your evening. Disabled people often encounter situations where there are barriers to accessibility. Sometimes, venues and services attempt to address this. In this example, although it's possible for everyone to access this restaurant, the experience of the disabled person is very different. It is uncomfortable, both physically and emotionally. The building itself is technically accessible, but the experience and atmosphere are not. Just because it's accessible, it doesn't mean it's inclusive. In other words, just because the disabled person can visit the restaurant, it doesn't mean they would want to if the experience does not make them feel welcome and valued. This example helps us to understand the difference between accessibility and inclusion in simple terms. Accessibility means you can. Inclusion means you want to. The opportunity is there for somebody to do the bare minimum. Inclusion means the individual feels thought about as part of the overall experience. When we're somewhere unfamiliar, we have to rely on different types of communication to navigate this new setting. Communication barriers can make it difficult for people to access and interact with services, leading to frustration, confusion, and isolation. In order for communication to be accessible and inclusive, it should be clear, direct, and easy to understand. It should be available in multiple formats, so that all users have equity of access. Sometimes, this also includes taking the time to assist others as they access information. In the workplace, everybody should have equal access to information. Lack of consideration of potential barriers prevent disabled people from fully taking part. In this scenario, by not looking at the person they are addressing and talking too fast, the people in the meeting are excluding their deaf colleague, as he is unable to read his colleague's lips. In this case, this leads to him being excluded from an opportunity. All three scenarios were accessible, but they were not inclusive, leading to frustration and inequality. Being inclusive is about enabling equity of access in order for the opportunity to be equal. What can you do in your workplace to make an experience inclusive and not just accessible?
Okay, I really wanted to show that clip because I felt like it really kind of emphasized this idea of accessibility, which is needed, but accessibility is only the first step. If we're not being thoughtful about inclusion, then we're really missing the mark, and it kind of takes away this effort that might have been made to be accessible. And I also wanted to share that clip because the very first scenario of the person using a wheelchair that entered the restaurant through the back door and in the kitchens, if you think that's an exaggeration, I can tell you it is not. I can't tell you how many times I have entered establishments through the back entrance because the front is not accessible. And it is like I will be candid. It's annoying. It's frustrating. It feels like you're causing a disruption. And instead of just being able to go and participate, you feel like all this attention is now on you and your needs that are the needs are perfectly there should be no room for embarrassment about what a person's needs are. But when we're not thinking about accessibility and inclusion, it's a perfect recipe for creating feelings of awkwardness and embarrassment when people should never ever have to feel embarrassed about the things that they need in order to be able to access and participate. Oops. Okay. So accessibility makes participation possible, but inclusion makes participation meaningful. This is just kind of an image that illustrates like why both are needed. We can't have inclusion without accessibility measures, but if we only have accessibility in place, we are missing so much opportunity for creating spaces where people feel safe, wanted, and that they belong. And if we skip that, then we are really missing out on including more diverse ideas and perspectives, whether it be like a restaurant or a party or a board that were of an organizational or that makes decisions for different aspects of community life. I'll tell you guys. So this is still something that I think that as a society we're getting a little bit better at, but we still have so much more improvement that can be made in as far as meeting this goal of having both accessibility and inclusion. A couple years ago, this was maybe just, I don't know, 4 years ago, I was attending a national conference for work, and it was a conference for special education teachers. And a lot of my work around employment focused on transition age youth or youth in schools that were ages 14 to 22 with disability. So that's why I was going to this conference. And I was actually invited to present at this conference. And the conference was in North Carolina, and I got my presentation ready. I was traveling with some colleagues and all of that. And it was at this hotel on the beach, near the beach, I should say. And I I made this assumption that was a mistake on my part. I thought because this is a conference for educators that work in special education, I had an expectation that there would be accessibility and inclusion in place. But when I flew over to the conference and I got there, I realized that I had overestimated the planning and intention and design around this conference. I was one of only a few that had noticeable disabilities. There may have been many other people that have disabilities or needed accessibility supports, but I I didn't know that because I didn't talk to everyone there, and I was only able to notice people that had mobility related disabilities. And the whole conference was incredibly frustrating because it was so inaccessible. Just there was no accessible transportation available, but in the information, they had said that there would be accessible transportation made available, but that wasn't the case, and there was no like eating areas to get to for if someone was using a wheelchair, and the whole experience became very frustrating. That wasn't the first time I've been in a situation like that. So, I'm creative, I'm scrappy, I know how to figure things out when I have to, but it nonetheless was very frustrating. But I think what was the most frustrating part about it is that I had this idea or this expectation that all these hundreds of professionals that worked in special education and were having workshops and presentations on accessibility and inclusion, they weren't really practicing those ideas and beliefs outside of the classroom. So when they planned their conference, they hadn't really considered what the need might be. So all that to say, I encourage people when you're planning an event, take that into consideration. And if you're not sure what that means or what's going to make sense to address accessibility needs and inclusion, I highly recommend that you involve somebody or more than not just one, but several people that use and need accessibility and have them be part of your planning to get their perception, their ideas, and their perspective to make it your event as inclusive as possible. There we go. Okay, so I want to touch briefly on universal design. So universal design, if this is a new concept, it's design that is not necessarily specific for people with mobility disabilities, but it's design that works for everyone. People that use wheelchairs, walkers, crutches, a knee scooter, but also parents with strollers, like suitcases on wheels, delivery workers, older adults. And the thing about universal design is it's a benefit to everyone. Inclusive environments often become more welcoming for everyone, not just people with disabilities. So teams become more creative because they include diverse perspectives. Schools foster empathy and collaboration among students, and workplaces see higher employment engagement and innovation when they include perspectives of people with disabilities. So just a few common barriers around accessibility. It could be a physical barrier. Those are kind of the things that our minds go to first. It could be a digital, like a website that's not compatible with screen readers, or videos that don't have captions, or just text that is not well formatted for people that struggle with vision. It could be a communication barrier, no sign language interpreter, complex language, lack of alternative formats, or it could be an attitudinal barrier. We could be making assumptions or operating based on stereotypes that we're holding on to. It could be that we don't have expectations for people with disabilities, like the conference that I just mentioned. The planning committee for that conference, it seemed very likely that as they were planning, they just didn't consider that there would be other professionals, other educators that would have accessibility needs that would be attending the conference. They were thinking only students need accommodations, but outside of the classroom, there's often still a need for accessibility. It could be attitudes of discrimination, or again, just holding on to assumptions or biases that we have around disability. And I don't think that, those attitudinal barriers, first of all, I'll say that I feel like out of all that is listed here, it's the attitudes that can potentially be the biggest barrier. But I don't think that people have stereotypes, low expectations, or discrimination because they are mean or they want to keep people with disabilities excluded. I think it's because they just haven't spent time exploring or considering what it could be to include people with disabilities. So I encourage anyone, whatever your profession or role is, to really think about what attitudes you have about people with disabilities. If you feel like you would benefit from more information, well, you're here at participating in an ECHO presentation. So that's a great first step. But there's so much information. I encourage you and challenge you to really take assessment of what your attitude around disability, what that looks like. So the benefit of inclusion is to really, it, like I mentioned, it's a benefit to everyone. It develops better teamwork, greater innovation, improved customer service, stronger communities, increased independence, and better mental well-being. Maybe that's like a piece of inclusion that you haven't thought of before, but considering like what inclusion does for people's mental health is a valuable idea to consider. Challenges could be cost misconceptions. I think a lot of times, especially like businesses, they think that it's going to cost a lot of money to make their establishment accessible. It could, but mostly I think it's lack of awareness or lack of creativity. It could be outdated infrastructure, limited disability, representation in decision making, and unconscious bias. So those are some of the challenges around, making places or events more accessible and inclusive, but some solutions could look like universal design, disability awareness training, inclusive hiring, accessible technology, and consulting people with disabilities, making sure that people with disabilities are part of the planning and conversation. And really just having this philosophy of continuous improvement rather than a one-time fix. So I want to pause for a minute and think about the value of inclusion and belonging. I feel like this is an idea that we don't prioritize enough. We feel like it's nice when it's in place, but we don't always think about it as a basic human need. But people thrive when they feel accepted, respected, and valued. Accessibility may allow someone to enter a space, but belonging ensures that they can fully participate, contribute, and be themselves without feeling like an outsider. Inclusion reflects equity, not just equality. So treating everyone exactly the same does not always result in equal opportunities. Belonging means recognizing that different people may need different support in order to participate in a way that is meaningful to them, and ensuring those supports are available without stigma, without feeling like it's a burden or you're putting somebody out or you're asking for more than what is reasonable. So inclusion brings human dignity. Every person deserves to be treated with respect and to feel that they are a valued member of the community. People with disabilities should not simply be allowed to participate. They should feel genuinely welcomed. I feel like when I think back on, disability history, or even through my own life, like we have to move away from this idea that to be inclusive, we're doing a grand favor for people with disabilities. It's a part of the human experience to experience disability, and I feel like we need to move closer to this idea of making sure that people feel genuinely welcome in a way that is not condescending, or that we are making it feel like there's this balance of power where people without disabilities are allowing people to participate by making things accessible and inclusive. It's just something that we need to adopt into our own lives, whether we are with people who have an obvious need or not. I want to talk a little bit about some best practices for inclusion. Involve people with disabilities. I've talked on this a couple of times, but really just thinking, and I know that it might, if you're new to interacting with people with disabilities, this might feel like a big deal. I promise you it's easy. It's not a big deal. People are people. And one of the most important principles is nothing about us without us. And this is this idea that we include people with disabilities in planning, decision making, and evaluating programs or services. we consider people with disabilities to be the experts on their own lives. An example of this could be ask employees with disabilities to help evaluate workplace policies or test new technology. And then design for everyone or universal design rather than creating accommodations after barriers are identified, design spaces, products, and services to be usable by as many people as possible from the very beginning. This could be like a step-free entrance, clear signage, automatic doors, videos with captions, adjustable workstations, and accessible websites. Another best practice is the use of inclusive communication. Make information understandable and available in multiple formats. So use plain language. I know that, especially in like the academic community, we like to be very verbose in our writing and sometimes even our speech. But if we're serious about including people with disabilities in discussions and conversations, I think using plain language is best. It's not just for people with disabilities, but it's also for people that maybe are not on the same page as far as their knowledge and experience of those that are writing or sharing information. Caption videos, provide transcripts for audio, use alternate text for images, ensure capability with screen readers, and speak directly to the person, not just a companion or interpreter. So these are some more best practices. Really thinking about developing a culture of respect. Policies alone do not create inclusion. People do. So encourage respectful language, active listening, empathy, zero tolerance for discrimination or harassment, recognition of everyone's contributions. And then think about reasonable accommodation. Offer support that enables people to participate fully without unnecessary barriers. And then train staff and leaders. If you're in a position where you have staff, even if you are not, your work is not directly connected to disability, I still encourage you, people with disabilities, it doesn't mean that people with disabilities are part of the community. So whatever your work is, whatever business you're a part of, you will encounter people with disabilities. It might not be an obvious disability, but by providing disability awareness and inclusion training to help people understand different types of disabilities, change stereotypes and unconscious bias, and really lean into this idea of respectful communication. I think it's helpful for all people. And then really regularly evaluate accessibility and inclusion. It doesn't need to be like, oh, we followed these steps, so now we're good for the next 20 years, but really make it an active practice of regularly looking at where the needs are and gather feedback to look at ways to continue to improve. Focus on strengths. Avoid assumptions about limitations, but instead recognize that each person's skills, talents, and contributions are of value. And then make inclusion an ongoing commitment. So needs, technologies, and best practices, they're always evolving. I know that can feel like sometimes frustrating, but I feel like it's a good thing. When I look back at where we were 30, 40, 50 years ago, we've made such good efforts, but we still have a lot of work to do. So accessibility opens the doors, inclusion invites people in, belonging makes them want to stay. A ramp, caption, or adaptive technology can remove barriers, but they do not automatically create connection. A true sense of belonging comes from attitudes, relationships, and organizational culture, where people with disabilities are respected, included in decisions, and empowered to contribute as equal members of the community. When accessibility, inclusion, and belonging work together, people are not only able to participate, but they're really able to flourish and be successful. Let me check the time. I feel like there were maybe some, Janelle, let me know if there was anything in the chat that needs to be addressed, but that's what I have to share with you. If you guys have questions, I'd love to hear your questions and chat more.
So Ashley wrote that she sometimes sees inclusion efforts become tokenism, something to be mindful of. I don't know if you want to speak to that at all.
Well, I think that's a good point. I think that it is easy to feel like again, like that idea of looking at the power balance, and when we are making efforts to be inclusive, it should come from a place of like genuinely wanting to be inclusive, so that we are opening up opportunities for all people. It's not that we're bestowing a favor or a privilege to people. It's just doing what is best for all people. So yes, it is that tokenism can be a slippery slope. So I'm glad you are thinking of that and share that point. Other questions? I'll share one. Oh, go ahead.
Kalia, this is Janelle. I was going to ask a question, and it may be a question that seems kind of silly or dumb. My question was, you mentioned that conference that you attended, and I know it's always best to have individuals on your committee. That doesn't always happen. Is there like a, kind of a rubric or a checklist that people can utilize to kind of do a self-assessment of how are they meeting individuals' needs?
Yeah,
that makes sense?
it does. It does. So, I mean, I don't know of like a checklist right off. I should, because I'm certain that there are some lists that exist, but I would just, even if you're not able to have somebody participate, this I know especially conference planning, usually that's a year-long process. So if you're not able to include someone with a disability in your conference planning, at least touch base with people like from time to time and check in, share your plans, and ask for feedback. And I'll share one thing that I'm really quite proud of that the Disability Institute is doing, that I get to be a part of. So a little over a year ago, like in our name, the Institute for Disability Research, Policy, and Practice. Obviously, research is part of what we do. And about a year ago, leadership at the Institute recognized that we needed to implement some more inclusive approaches around our research. So we developed an advisory board of people with different kinds of disabilities and a few family members of those with disabilities that and the purpose of this group and this advisory board is to be part of the research process. So the Institute has a team of researchers that are always engaged in evaluations and studies and research. And that advisory board, we actively give feedback to the research process. And really, we're trying to build this idea of including people with disabilities very early on in the research design process, not just asking for feedback after research design is already in place, but getting perspective and feedback from the very beginning. This is a big deal because so much of research impacts the lives of people with disabilities, either through services or policy or just so many different ways. So if people are doing disability focused research, but not including people with disabilities in that research, not just as participants, but as co-designers in the research, then chances are we're missing the mark and we're not actually meeting the intended outcome of that research. So that is, like I said, something that I'm proud of. It's still in development, but even within a year's time, we've been able to, formulate a team and give feedback to multiple research initiatives and projects.
So Kelly, that made me think, sorry, this is Janelle again, made me think of one other question that I have for you. So your family did a great job of helping you become an advocate for accessibility and inclusion. And as you know, my heart and soul lies in early intervention and with families. So how is an early intervention provider can I help support families become better advocates for their kids and be helping them train their kids how to be advocates for themselves? That is a lifelong. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked that. That's a great question. So, as professionals supporting families, I think one of the biggest things you can do is create an environment where it feels safe and comfortable to ask for what is needed. And like you can ask all the time and even give a list of like these are some things we can do to help you and provide and meet the needs that you're having. But here's what I've learned is we don't always know what the need is going to be in advance. Sometimes the need we're not aware of it until we're several months down the road, whether that's like in school, like we've started school or we're participating in some kind of program, but really just yes, offering like suggestions to meet the needs, but really just having this open, receptive attitude of please you can tell me what your needs are. I'm here to like be a support, but also because the reason is I feel like it's hard to ask for what you need. I remember vividly being in elementary school, junior high, and high school, and knowing what I needed, but feeling too um just not feeling like I could ask that. I didn't want it, I didn't want it to become a big to do or situation where all this focus was on me. So often I didn't ask for what I needed. And it wasn't until I was about in high school that I really decided, you know what, I I have to start asking for what I need. And in my in my experiences, people were very receptive when I did ask for what I need. So I wish I would have started it sooner, but no one's going to know. And even you as a professional, you're not going to know what people's needs are because you're not living that life. You're not in their place. So you don't know all the small nuances of their lives and their how they move and navigate through their life. So really just creating a relationship and an environment where it feels comfortable and safe to ask. And um I feel like that would go a long way. I feel like if somebody would have asked me, like, Kelly, what in your high school day is difficult? What do you have to do that is really hard for you or that you're not able to do? If somebody would have um asked me that, I think that would have changed a lot for me. And I'm not placing the responsibility, but I was a kid, so when you're a teenager, you're not that bright, and so you don't want to make a fuss. You want more than anything to blend in. So I honestly, I feel like just creating a relationship where there is trust and comfort and where people feel like it's okay to vocalize what their needs are. I think that's the biggest thing that can be done. And that alone, um, when you're receptive to, not that you have to give um everything that is asked for, but when you have like a positive response to the person making the ask, that's going to teach them it's okay to ask for what you need. It's okay to take up the space in this world that I need in order to exist and participate.
Great, thank you. And then Ashley's dropped some resources into the chat. So the IDRPP has a checklist that was created to kind of look at inclusive meetings, and then shared a great checklist also from Mobility International USA. So thank you, Ashley, for sharing those.
All right, any other thoughts or questions? Well, I welcome any questions you might have in the future. If you're like me, I never have questions in the moment. It's usually, hours after the fact that I think of something. So if that's the case, please reach out. I'm happy to connect or point you in whatever directions I can to lead you to the information that you're seeking.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kelly. What a great presentation. We're going to shift gears, and Megan Boyd is who is presenting our case for us today. So Megan, I have it up.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It is my turn to present for the case study or case presentation today. So I'm Megan Boyd. I am the Early Intervention Program Director at DDI Vantage. I have my master's in special ed. I taught for 8 years, and I've been at DDI for 19. Oh my. So yeah, I've been doing this a long time, this kind of work. So, and I enjoy it. Go ahead, Janelle. So yes, my background, I am a special educator by trade, my master's in special ed. I've been a teacher. Right now I'm in early intervention, the director of the early intervention program. I have a caseload and I help cover evals, eligibility evals, but most of my time is spent doing administration. So I recently had a male child, who turned 3 at the end of July on my caseload. The parent original referral reason was expressive language. This little boy has quite a bit of language, but it was very, very hard to understand. And so the mom wanted just our input for 3 months. I think he came in at 33 months before he turned 3. They're white, non-Latino family dynamics. There's one younger sister who's 14 months, and both mom and dad are in the home. Parenting learning styles, I would say permissive, really high warmth for the developmental age of this child, being almost 3, and I would almost say it's too high with low expectations. So I don't know if that's its own category, but we're calling it permissive, because I do think it plays into what I would see at home visits. So other applicable information about the family. Mom is a former school teacher of special needs kids, kind of behavioral kids with behavioral needs. Because of her experience teaching in the school system, she's very interested in homeschooling her kids. She feels the school system is inadequate. And this was a discussion concern I brought up. She did too, actually. We had some good discussions. Because my concern is if the child is going to be homeschooled, how will he receive appropriate speech services and social emotional skills to practice those skills, social emotional skills, and opportunity to learn how to navigate situations where he becomes dysregulated. When he is not in a classroom daily, when he's being homeschooled instead, what are those opportunities going to look like? Janelle? So here's my area of concern that you guys can maybe help me with. I would love to get your input and just help me think more outside the box. So my primary area of concern actually ended up being his behavior. It wasn't language. When I got in there and I actually got to know them, I realized that his behavior was my primary concern, and actually his mother's, once I got settled and we were having these discussions. And then distinguishing between what were sensory behaviors that we had to regulate and what were true, like 2-year-old, 3-year-old emotional behaviors. Like, I really didn't know what we were working with. Until I kind of had been a month had gone by or 2 months, and then it became more clear. So here's some things that I observed. He has difficulty being in the presence of his younger sister, who's 14 months. He would purposefully kick, hit, bite, push, step on, and strip items and toys from her. And he would try to do when mom was not looking. I laugh only because we were in this tiny little room, the 4 of us, mom, the little girl, the little boy, and myself. And it was when he was in this space, it was a little chaotic. It's my favorite place to be, though. I love that stuff. So it came up that I feel he had difficulty regulating his behavior, particularly around other children, as his mom was telling me stories about how the week went, what kinds of things they did in the community, situations with high energy, whether it's high energy, you're going to a party, or it's high energy between two kids, like the little boy and his cousin. Anything with that high energy, he became very dysregulated and would show these behaviors that you see above that he would do to his sister. So in our hour-long home visits, he would start to dysregulate around 30 minutes into the visit. When not regulated, he would behave aggressively towards parent and others, would shout, scream loudly at people, familiar and not familiar people. It didn't matter if it was someone on the street or someone he knew. And then he had this, he would often make a screech kind of sound specific to him that he made up when he was not regulated, and he'd like run up to strangers and do this sound. And so he just had this very interesting characteristics about him that his mom would tell me, very specific things that I feel like, what is really going on with him? Janelle? Sorry, so little. So goals: to provide sensory strategies to implement to help him regulate during high energy situations that cause him to dysregulate. How to do these strategies, especially in the community or any sort of loud, high energy environment, even at home. This question, does the individual has not yet been met? Well, funny is that no, we met his one goal, because in the initial IFSP, we were talking about expressive language being the family's priority. So that's what we wrote the goal in. And then as I got to know the family and got to know the child, the mom and I started working on more sensory behavioral strategies. And when we were working with his strategies, his communication did get better as he was able to regulate, and we could kind of implement some things. So during, so that's kind of what happened. So yes, he made his he met his IFSP goal, but it was an expressive language, not what we ended up being mostly concerned about. And he was only in the program for 3 months before he turned 3. Contributing factor, again, the ability to regulate his sensory behaviors and emotional behavior challenges was easier in the home environment. So it was easier when I was doing a home visit, but the brunt of the problems and need was in the community or in groups of people, which is harder to implement and control. And then for individual cases, what are common triggers? His triggers seem to be a loud environment, his sister, high energy environment, and want of attention, negative or positive, is what I observed. Janelle? So I was just hoping that you guys could give me some ideas. Even though he's exited, I still can contact family. If you have any good strategies when the child is showing warning signs of dysregulation, the mother and I talked through examples, and I modeled when I could in home visits. And then the next thing was that made me think when we were talking about parenting learning styles, set expectations for his true developmental age, remembering that family can have higher expectations for their child based on his age. As I was in the home, I realized with the permissive parenting, the warmth was there, the understanding was there, but it was almost too much warmth and understanding, so that when he was having behaviors or a hard time, he would inappropriately ask for hugs because his mom wanted the hug more than he seemed to want the hug. So the expectations, I think we're kind of getting there, but the expectations developmentally for social emotional and how to do boundaries and expectations and how to follow them and follow through might have been helpful, but that's a tricky place to talk to a parent about. So how do you discuss that with a parent and try to kind of convey what you're seeing for the best of the child, for everything, and the family and his little sister? So, um, so here are the suggestions: sensory strategies to implement within the community and parenting strategies. Styles to one, changing from permissive parenting to one with high warmth and predictable routine and follow through. One with higher expectations, still appropriate for the child's age though. And I think that's it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
What? Do you have anything else?
No, that's just a big jumble of my thoughts. You guys are welcome to it.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go into breakout rooms. Hub members all have their questions. I blanked on my word for a minute. So go ahead and jump into those. Oh, we were in one group and we had some ideas around the sensory, and Ashley took our notes. So Ashley, you want to give an idea?
Sure. And with just a few minutes left, I'm going to try and be as brief as I can. So creating sensory kits with various different sensory items, and then making that his own like special backpack. So that is his. So if he ever, tries to take something from sister, redirecting and setting boundaries, that is his and that is hers. Maybe headphones, since loud environments seem to be triggering. Someone suggested chewing gum, right? That's a sensory thing, but also his mouth is a little busy, so maybe he won't be able to screech. Modeling, asking for a break, discovering and going over, like, again, what have you tried? What has been successful? What wasn't so successful? And then brainstorming through those items. Just acknowledging that you may have to explore and do trial and error to figure out what is helpful and what is not helpful. And then teaching the parents how to navigate appropriate boundaries. Like, this is a place where you can scream. This is not a place where you can scream. And then teaching the parents how they can handle that situation. Identifying what kind of the first signs or the triggers are. Making sure that the parents feel equipped to stay kind of as neutral as possible, teaching them how to remain calm in those situations, having parents connect with other parent groups for support, but also for brainstorming and education. This was a really great suggestion of trying to predict environments that he can handle. And then as he develops his skills, have him go into maybe some more challenging environments so that he can practice those skills, but also do that for the parent, kind of a flip side of the parent. What situations and environments can the parent handle and build those skills up? And then lastly, as soon as the parent kind of acknowledges or notices some of the warning signs that he may be dysregulated, removing him from the situation, providing his sensory kit, setting a timer, and then just trying again. Sorry, I talk so fast.
That's great. Okay, so somebody from the next group, Myrna, how about one idea from your group before we wrap up? Or Mandy, it looks like Mandy came off mute. Okay.
I took notes, so I will go ahead. We just talked about having different levels of, so that there are options, if they can just like hold his hands, remind him gentle hands instead of hitting. If that works, great. If not, then the next level might be removing him to a place where he can calm, use a timer so that he knows when the time is going to end, and then possibly letting him play by himself before rejoining the group so that we can make sure he's going to remain calm.
Great, thank you. If you each hub member will email your notes to the disabilityecho@usu.edu. For everybody else, we compile all of the breakout group notes into a document that we store on Canvas. You are always free to go back and download that and utilize that with any of the families that you are currently working with. So like in our group, Alex talked about a great resource that she uses in her school that I think would be super helpful for all of us to kind of know about. So appreciate all of your guys' thoughts and insights on it. And then if you're presenting a case, you get those emailed to you. So Megan, we will send those out to you as well.
Thanks, everybody. those are all good. A lot of them I've tried, but I like the ideas. So thank you. At least I was kind of on the right track.
Sometimes that's just also knowing, am I also on the right track with these families? So great. Just to let you know, in September, we will not have a session because it is Labor Day. So hopefully you are taking the day off and ending up your summer in a positive note. And we will resume back in October, so October 5th. That's very painful that October is right around the corner. Kurt, I see you and I'm ignoring you on that. Where we will be talking about identification and awareness of cerebral palsy. So thank you all. Take the rest of the summer and enjoy the heat because, as I just said, October, I'm going to be crying over the cold weather.